Sovereign citizens genuinely believe the law has a cheat code. Say the right words, flash a laminated card, and cops just let you go. 101 of them tested that theory on real police officers. Homemade IDs. Courtroom breakdowns. One man sat in a Walmart parking lot for 14 hours. Every single one failed, some of them spectacularly. Seriously, never attempt this. 1. I'm not driving, I'm traveling. 5 words that have wasted more police hours than actual crime. A Texas trooper heard this classic, let the silence hang for 3 full seconds, and said, "Cool story." The ticket was $215. Traveling ain't free either. 2. At a Florida DUI checkpoint, a woman cracked her window 1 inch and slid out a laminated card. "I do not consent to this interaction." The cop read both sides, put it in his pocket, and said, "Ma'am, step out." Lamination has never once equaled legislation. 3. The DoorDash bag was right there, on the passenger seat, in plain view. And yet this Ohio driver looked a cop dead in the eyes and swore he wasn't engaged in commerce. Officer didn't argue, just slowly pointed at the bag. Case closed without a single word. 4. Imagine citing a document that expired in 1789 during a traffic stop. A Georgia man pulled out the Articles of Confederation to explain why he didn't need plates. Cop asked what year he thought it was. No answer. Got towed. The articles remain retired. 5. I have the rights of an illegal alien, screamed at full volume. Mid-arrest, in Arizona. This woman called herself a free inhabitant under Article 4 and believed that meant complete legal immunity forever. She went viral all right, just not the way she hoped. 6. Printed at Staples, on cardstock, with a glue stick photo. That was the Moorish Nation Ambassador ID one guy handed a South Carolina cop with absolute confidence. Officer flipped it over. The Staples receipt was still stuck to the back. Ambassador status denied. 7. 45 minutes. That's how long a Michigan man sat in his car pressing a "no jurisdiction" sign against his window. One problem. He was holding it backwards. The cop couldn't read it. Nobody could. Just a grown man holding paper wrong while slowly getting arrested. 8. Gold fringe on a courtroom flag. That's all it took for one defendant to declare the entire room was under maritime law. The judge, who's heard this maybe 600 times, just said, "No, it doesn't." Added contempt charges. The fringe is decorative, always has been. 9. 90 in a 55. When the trooper pulled him over, this Idaho sovereign said his vessel was merely in transit. Officer's response was ice cold. "Your vessel almost killed a family of 4. Get out." Vessels still have to obey speed limits, apparently. 10. Am I being detained or am I free to go? 17 times, back to back, without once letting the officer answer. When the cop finally squeezed a word in, he said, "Detained." The man looked shocked, like his script didn't have a second page. 11. One Oklahoma driver told a cop he did not create joinder during a routine stop. The officer blinked, clearly had zero idea what joinder meant, and said, "I don't know what that is, but here's your ticket for running a red." You don't need a law degree to write citations. 12. A handwritten sign taped where a license plate should be. Private property, not for hire. This Oregon man drove past an actual police station with it. Didn't make it 2 blocks. That's not a legal defense. That's a flashing neon invitation to get pulled over. 13. Here's a new one. A man in Minnesota refused to say his zip code during booking because using a zip code creates federal jurisdiction over your person. The officer asked how he got mail. He said he used the zip code for mail but not for legal purposes. That's the same zip code, my guy. 14. New Mexico. 20 straight minutes of a man lecturing an officer about the Uniform Commercial Code through his car window. Cop said nothing, just radioed for backup. 3 cruisers arrived. Suddenly, the legal scholar remembered how door handles work. 15. I don't recognize the corporate United States? Bold statement from a Virginia woman who was driving on corporate roads, past corporate streetlights, in a car registered with a corporate DMV. The officer recognized her, though. Specifically, her lack of valid insurance. 16. Tricorn hat. Copy of the Constitution. Full colonial energy. One man showed up to court in Arkansas looking like a Founding Father cosplayer and told the judge he was a sovereign national. The judge gave him 90 days. The hat added nothing but entertainment value. 17. A vehicle is a commercial instrument, and my car is a private conveyance. This California sovereign delivered that line standing next to a beat-up 2003 Civic with a missing bumper. The cop looked at the car, looked at him, wrote the ticket in silence. 18. You're under arrest for impersonating a law enforcement officer, said to a uniformed cop by a guy with no license in Alabama. This man pulled plastic zip ties from his pocket and genuinely tried to restrain the officer. He was face down on asphalt in seconds. The zip ties were bagged as evidence. 19. Mid-stop, mid-sentence. A Pennsylvania man just drove away because he withdrew his consent. The officer executed a flawless pit maneuver 2 blocks later. Consent, as it turns out, was never part of the equation. Neither was his bumper after that. 20. Ever copyright your own name and then charge $500 per use? One Nebraska guy did. Told the cop he'd owe $500 every time he said it. The officer said it 6 times while writing the citation. $3,000 of imaginary debt. The ticket, however, was very real. 21. Booking. Standard procedure. Fingerprints. A Kentucky woman jerked her hand away and said the state had no right to her biological data. The officer explained it wasn't optional. She asked for a lawyer. The lawyer told her to give her fingerprints. She did. Slowest booking in county history. 22. Here's a guy who truly believed in his content. Filmed his 38-minute argument with an Indiana cop and uploaded it thinking he destroyed the system. 17,000 comments. Not a single one on his side. Cell phone of the decade. 23. Every document. Every single one. Under duress, written carefully next to the signature. During booking, during processing, on every form they put in front of him. This man genuinely believed those 2 words would invalidate his entire arrest like some kind of legal undo button. The booking officer processed each page without even glancing at the margins. 2 magic words that magically did nothing. Probably the easiest arrest that officer processed all week. 24. So what are you then? A Washington state cop asked this after a man announced he'd revoked his personhood and was no longer subject to traffic laws. The man said, I am a man. The cop said, cool, you're under arrest, man. Personhood revoked. Handcuffs applied. 25. Red ink. Apparently in sovereign citizen world, red ink has mystical legal power. One New Jersey man wrote an entire notice of non-consent in it and handed it over during a stop. All it did was smudge all over the cop's gloves. The only thing red ink summoned that day was a dry cleaning bill. 26. You work for a corporation, not a government. You have no real authority. A Montana man dropped this theory on a state trooper. Trooper asked if the corporate handcuffs would feel any different. The man chose not to find out voluntarily. Smart move. His only one that day. 27. A $47,000 lien filed against a cop for a speeding ticket. A sovereign citizen in North Carolina actually went through the paperwork to do this. Lien got dismissed. He got charged with filing a fraudulent document. That speeding ticket just got real expensive. 28. Self-incrimination any percent speed run. A Colorado man said he wouldn't answer questions, then spent 15 uninterrupted minutes explaining sovereign law in detail. While talking, the K-9 unit circled his car. He did more damage to himself than the cop ever could. 29. Capital letters. That was the whole defense. A North Carolina man told a judge that his name printed in all caps on court documents was a straw man, a separate legal entity. Not him. Judge asked, "Are you the person standing in front of me?" He said yes. Case closed. 30. Under what authority are you detaining me? An Illinois woman asked. The law, said the cop. Which law? She pressed. The one you broke running that stop sign. You'd think she'd have a follow-up prepared. She did not. End of legal debate. 31. Exempt. Hand-painted in white on a black rectangle where a license plate should be. A Wisconsin sovereign drove around with this proudly displayed. Got 3 citations before noon. Nothing was exempt. He was not exempt. The word does not work like a cheat code. 32. A silver dollar, placed into a cop's hand during a traffic stop. Payment for safe passage. This Indiana man treated a state highway like a medieval toll bridge and the officer like a gatekeeper. The officer was not a troll under a bridge, although the man was testing that line. 33. A Michigan man printed a fake court order dismissing all charges against himself. Brought it to the courthouse like a golden ticket. The clerk recognized the font as Comic Sans. Real court orders don't use Comic Sans. They also aren't printed at home on an inkjet. He caught a forgery charge on top of everything else. 34. Kingdom of Heaven. That was the government listed on this man's homemade ID. Occupation: Child of God. A Kansas officer asked if the Kingdom of Heaven had a DMV. It did not. It also didn't have a valid license, registration, or insurance. Heavenly Kingdom, earthly problems. 35. Here's a plot twist. A sovereign citizen in Delaware argued at a DUI checkpoint for so long that by the time they tested him, he'd actually sobered up. Still arrested for driving without a license, though. You could call it a partial win. I absolutely would not. 36. She opted out. Wrote a notarized letter to the governor of Michigan revoking her participation in the legal system. The governor never responded. Because you cannot unsubscribe from the law like it's a mailing list. There is no opt-out. There never was. 37. Diplomatic vehicle. Stickers everywhere. Hood, doors, trunk, bumper, all over a 2004 Honda Accord in North Carolina. Not a diplomat. Not a diplomatic vehicle. Stickers were from Amazon. $15 for a pack of 12. He used every single one. 38. 300 pages. Single-spaced, with footnotes. Filed with a West Virginia county clerk declaring personal sovereignty. The clerk stamped it, filed it, and it changed absolutely nothing. 300 pages of effort that accomplished exactly as much as a blank sheet would have. 39. Eyes closed. Window up, just sitting there. An Oklahoma man's response to being pulled over was to simply stop acknowledging reality. If he can't see the cop can't see him. Peekaboo law, the tow truck arrived in 2 minutes. Sovereignty ended with a hook and chain. 40. Most people run from cops. A sovereign citizen in Oregon tried to place an officer under citizen's arrest during his own traffic stop. Read the charges from a notepad and everything. The cop let him finish, then put real handcuffs on him. Not the power move he imagined. 41. Cease and desist. Served to a Tennessee officer during the man's own arrest on printer paper. The cop glanced at it and said, "This isn't real." The man said, "It's notarized." It was not notarized. It was not real. Nothing about it was anything. 42. A megaphone. In traffic court, a Louisiana man brought one and tried to read the Declaration of Independence at full volume. Made it to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness before the bailiff shut it down. Liberty did not pursue him back out those doors. 43. A guy in Ohio tried to declare aisle 14 of a Home Depot as a sovereign Moorish consulate. Set up a lawn chair. Refused to let customers buy power tools without paying him a tariff. The real police arrived. The consulate was dismantled. He is now permanently banned from all locations. 44. This one takes absolute nerve. A Florida sovereign filed a fraudulent paper title claiming ownership of a local police cruiser. Then he called a civilian tow truck to repossess it straight from the precinct parking lot. The tow driver realized it immediately. The sovereign caught a grand theft auto charge. 45. A boat registration number, bolted to a car. Because all vehicles are vessels under admiralty law. An Idaho sovereign committed fully to this theory. The DMV had never seen it. The cop had never seen it. No one had ever seen it. Because it's absolutely unhinged. 46. Produced the original Constitution, not a copy. The original? Demanded in open court in Arkansas over a speeding ticket. The judge was not dispatching someone to the National Archives for 45 in a 35. Request denied. Common sense prevailed. 47. Paper bag over the head at a sobriety checkpoint. Protecting his identity, this Maryland man explained through the bag. Officers removed it. He was extremely drunk. The bag strategy was bold, but ultimately the only thing it concealed was good judgment. 48. Freedom flap. That's what a Nevada sovereign called the tiny slit in his glued-shut car window that he used to communicate with police. The fire department was called. The jaws of life were deployed. The freedom flap did not survive. Neither did his legal theory. 49. Do you need a life jacket? A Georgia judge asked this after a defendant spent 10 minutes arguing the courtroom was operating under admiralty law because of the flag fringe. The whole room laughed. The judge was having a good day. The defendant was not. 50. Refusing to sign a ticket because a signature creates a contract with the government. A Nebraska man held this line until the officer said the alternative was jail. The pen hit paper so fast it almost caught fire. Principles have a shelf life, and his expired in 4 seconds. 51. I am the court, said with full chest, in an actual courtroom, to an actual judge. A Florida man declared himself a de jure judge and tried to dismiss his own case from the defendant's chair. The real judge let him finish, then added 6 months. Self-appointed authority has limits. 52. 911 call from a Georgia woman reporting a kidnapping in progress. Panicked voice. Genuine urgency. A unit was dispatched. Turns out the kidnapping was her boyfriend's routine arrest for driving without a license. She wanted the cops who arrested him arrested by other cops. Dispatch asked if she was serious. She was. Tragically, completely, 100% serious. A second unit showed up just to be confused. 53. Show me the injured party. Demanded after running 3 red lights in Vermont. Officer said the injured party would have been whoever he eventually hit. The man argued nobody was hit. Cop said, "Yeah, that's the whole point of traffic laws." Flawless logic. Totally ignored. 54. A promissory note. Handwritten. On notebook paper. Presented to a Texas courthouse as payment for a $1,200 fine. Drawn on the U.S. Treasury. The clerk stared at it for 10 seconds and called security. He tried this at 2 other courthouses that same week. 55. Most people hire lawyers. A North Dakota sovereign filed a motion to have the judge arrested for treason against the people. The motion was 4 pages, cited 0 real laws, and included a YouTube link as a source. Judge read it aloud in court. The gallery was in tears. 56. Squatting. In a $500,000 house. In Florida, a sovereign citizen changed the locks on a vacant home, filed a fake deed with the county, and told responding officers he had claimed the property under common law. Cops removed him. The locks lasted longer than his legal theory. 57. An Arizona woman refused to leave a courtroom after her case was dismissed. Not because she won, because she wanted to put the judge on trial next. Bailiffs physically removed her while she screamed about the people's authority. The people did not back her up. 58. Fake currency gets creative. A California man printed his own sovereign bonds and tried to buy a truck at a dealership. The salesman called the cops instead of running the paperwork. The bonds had his face on them, like actual printed portrait. On money he made at home. 59. This badge is fraudulent unless you can produce your oath of office right now. A Minnesota sovereign said this to an officer during a traffic stop, like it was a trump card. The cop said he left his oath at the office, right next to the thing he didn't need to show random drivers. 60. Property taxes. A Tennessee man returned every bill to the county stamped "refused for cause" in red ink for 6 straight years. The county eventually seized his house. 6 years of red ink stamps. Not one of them slowed the auction down. The house was sold on a Tuesday. 61. Imagine calling yourself an Aboriginal Indigenous Moor to get out of a parking ticket. In Delaware, a man presented a tribal ID from a nation that doesn't exist, cited treaties that were never signed, and demanded the officer address him as Your Excellency. The officer did not. 62. Traffic Court, Ohio. A woman stood up and said, "I don't understand these proceedings." Not because she was confused. She'd read online that saying those exact words meant the court couldn't continue. The judge said, "Then I'll explain them to you," and proceeded normally. 63. You are hereby banished from my sovereign territory. Read aloud. From a scroll. On a public sidewalk, a Virginia man tried to exile a police officer from what he called his jurisdiction. The sidewalk belonged to the city. The scroll was printer paper rolled up. The officer was not banished. 64. 2 words on a bumper sticker changed everything. Sovereign citizen. A cop in Louisiana said that sticker alone made him run the plates. Expired registration, suspended license, outstanding warrant. That bumper sticker was basically a written invitation. 65. A New York man fired his public defender mid-trial and declared he would represent himself under God's law. His opening statement was 14 minutes of Bible verses. The jury deliberated for 22 minutes. Guilty. God's law did not override New York's. 66. I'm going to need your name and badge number so I can file a lien against you personally, said to an Alaska state trooper during a snowstorm. On the highway shoulder, at -15 degrees, the trooper wrote the ticket and left. The sovereign stood in the cold, filing nothing. 67. Creative Plate of the Year goes to an Indiana man who bolted a wooden plaque to his bumper that read, "Traveling under God's grace," in hand-carved letters. Beautiful craftsmanship, genuinely impressive woodwork, still not a license plate, still got pulled over immediately. 68. A Georgia man tried to drive onto a military base without ID, telling the MP at the gate he had unrestricted right to travel on federal land. Military police don't debate. They especially don't debate with a guy in a Kia Sorento citing the Magna Carta. He was face down on concrete in under 30 seconds. 69. Court filings from a Texas sovereign included a 30-page document titled Affidavit of Truth. It declared him a living man who existed on the land and not in the jurisdiction. The clerk stamped it and filed it in what courthouse staff later called the funny drawer. 70. A South Carolina man pulled over for a busted headlight somehow escalated it into a 40-minute constitutional debate on the shoulder of a 2-lane road. The cop originally planned to let him off with a verbal warning. No ticket, no citation, just fix your light. By minute 40, the officer had written 4 separate citations out of pure frustration. Sometimes the best legal strategy is shutting up. This man did the exact opposite and paid for every second of it. 71. You are engaging in piracy, said to a Nevada officer writing a parking ticket. Piracy. On dry land. In a strip mall parking lot, next to a subway. The officer finished the ticket, handed it over, and walked away without a word. That's professional restraint right there. 72. A Michigan couple tried to start their own country on their 5-acre property. Named it. Drew borders on a map. Sent declarations of independence to the state governor, the president, and the United Nations. None responded. Their country still had to pay property taxes. 73. A Utah man spent 11 minutes explaining to a cop that driver's licenses are voluntary contracts, and he had withdrawn from the contract. The officer said, "So you don't have a license?" He said, "Correct." Officer said, "Then we agree." Cuffs came out. 74. Live streaming your own arrest while narrating like a sports commentator. That's what a Colorado sovereign did to his 12 followers. "They're violating my rights in real time, folks." They were putting on a seatbelt citation. 12 people watched. Nobody donated. 75. Most people just pay parking tickets. An Oregon man responded to a $35 ticket by filing a 15-page affidavit of denial with the municipal court. The court processed it as a not guilty plea. He showed up, gave the same speech, lost, and paid $35 plus court costs. 76. Mid-traffic stop, an Arizona man handed the officer a laminated fee schedule. It stated that detaining him cost $2,000 an hour, payable strictly in silver bullion. The officer read it, handed it back, and wrote a regular citation. The man mailed an invoice anyway. It went straight into the trash. 77. A Connecticut woman walked into a DMV, slapped a handwritten document on the counter, and demanded they nullify her corporate identity. The clerk asked if she wanted to update her address. She screamed about the 14th Amendment and was escorted out. The DMV has seen worse, honestly. 78. Jury duty summons. Returned to sender with a 2-page essay about how the recipient was not a U.S. citizen but a state national. The court didn't care. Bench warrant issued. He was found and arrested at, of all places, the post office, mailing his next sovereign document. 79. That's a nice speech. You're still going to jail. A Mississippi judge said this after a 15-minute sovereign citizen monologue that referenced the Magna Carta, the Bible, Black's Law Dictionary, and somehow the Treaty of Paris. 15 minutes of research. 5 seconds of reality. 80. One Alabama man called a cop a corporate mercenary to his face during a stop. The officer, completely deadpan, said, "The mercenary needs to see your license." No license, no insurance, no registration. 3 for 3. The mercenary had a productive afternoon. 81. You know that friend who always doubles down? A Virginia sovereign got tased, and while on the ground, still managed to yell that the tasing was a violation of the Geneva Convention. Even face down and convulsing, the legal arguments continued. Commitment is not the same as correctness. 82. A Kansas man drove a riding lawnmower on a state highway and told the officer it wasn't a motor vehicle because it's not designed for road travel. The officer agreed it wasn't designed for road travel. That was exactly the problem. The lawnmower was impounded. He walked home. 83. A Hawaii sovereign told a cop he was traveling under the law of the land, not the law of the sea. Brother, you are on an island, surrounded entirely by sea. The irony could sink a battleship. The cop didn't even engage. Wisest move of the whole interaction. 84. Fake diplomatic passports are a whole genre. A New Mexico man made one listing his nationality as Earth and his issuing authority as the Creator. Customs at the El Paso border crossing kept it, probably still passing it around the break room to this day. 85. A Montana man argued with a game warden for 40 minutes about whether fishing licenses applied to free men on the land. He was standing knee-deep in a public river, in a state park, holding a rod with a fish still dangling on the line. Every single detail of his situation contradicted his argument. The fish was released. The man was not. The warden later said it was the longest conversation he'd ever had with someone actively holding evidence of the crime. 86. I'm placing you under citizen's arrest, said by a handcuffed man, in the back of a cruiser, to the Massachusetts officer driving him to booking. The officer asked on what charge. The man said treason, from the back seat, in handcuffs, while being arrested himself. Peak sovereignty. 87. Sovereign couple goals. A husband and wife in Texas both refused to exit their vehicle during a stop. Both cited different sovereign theories. He went with no joinder. She went with free inhabitant. They couldn't even agree on which fake law to break real laws with. Both got arrested. 88. You'd think a guy who lost in court 17 times would maybe reconsider his legal strategy. A Wisconsin sovereign represented himself in every case, lost all 17, exposed himself to charges he wouldn't have gotten with a lawyer. Exposed is the key word. In every sense. 89. A Washington man filed a UCC financing statement listing himself as both debtor and creditor. Essentially, he tried to own himself as collateral. The county clerk filed it because they file everything. It did nothing. He now exists in a government database as a man who is financially indebted to himself. 90. A Washington man created an entire court of record in his living room, declared himself the judge, sentenced a local cop to life in prison for giving him a ticket, mailed the sentence to the police department. The department did not comply. The cop is still free, still giving tickets. 91. A New Jersey man showed up to every court appearance in a ship captain's hat because Admiralty law. Every single hearing, same hat. The judge eventually asked if it was the same hat or if he had multiple. He had 3. One for court, one for driving, one for formal occasions. 92. During arraignment, a Nevada man refused a public defender because the lawyer had a bar card, which means they secretly work for the British Crown. He represented himself, cited a treaty from the 1700s. The judge gave him the maximum penalty. The British Crown remains entirely uninvolved. 93. A New Hampshire man refused to stand when the judge entered because I do not recognize this authority. The judge didn't care if he stood, sat, or did a handstand. Found him guilty sitting down. Respect for the court is optional. The court's power over you is not. 94. Rubber stamps, a whole collection. Rejected. Without prejudice. No contract. A Kentucky man stamped every piece of government mail he received for 3 years and sent it back. The IRS still processed his tax debt. You cannot stamp your way out of financial obligations. 95. An Idaho woman told a cop her car was not a vehicle but a vessel in dry dock and therefore couldn't be towed. The tow truck arrived 12 minutes later, hooked up the vessel, dragged it to dry dock, also known as the impound lot. Vessel reclaimed at $250. 96. 37 sovereign citizens once showed up to a Michigan courthouse to dissolve the county government. 37 adults. They coordinated, drove there, parked, walked in together, and read a proclamation out loud to a clerk who had absolutely no idea what was happening. The county government continued to exist. Everyone went home. The county still collects taxes. 37 people made noise in a building and accomplished absolutely nothing, as a group. 97. 14 hours. A California man sat in his locked car in a Walmart parking lot for 14 hours refusing to come out after a traffic violation. Officers waited. Shifts changed. The sun set. He finally came out because he needed a bathroom. Nature defeated sovereign ideology in the end. 98. A West Virginia sovereign refused to enter a plea, so the judge entered not guilty for him. He objected. Said entering any plea meant accepting the court's jurisdiction. Judge said, "Great, you don't accept it, and we're moving forward anyway." The system does not require your acceptance. 99. A man in Rhode Island demanded his case be moved to common law court. The judge asked where that was located. The man didn't know, because it doesn't exist. There is no building, there is no address. There is no common law court. There's just regular court, where he was already standing. 100. Tax refund. $47 million. Filed by a Louisiana man based on his birth certificate bond theory. The IRS did not send $47 million. They sent an audit. Then they sent a fraud investigation. Then they sent an indictment. The refund check never came. The prison sentence did. 101. Final one. A sovereign citizen in Texas asked a cop, "Do you know who I am?" The officer said, "No, sir, that's why I asked for your license." Thousands of hours of YouTube research, hundreds of laminated cards printed, dozens of fake IDs created. Not once has any of it worked. Not once, and somehow they keep trying. That was 101 sovereign citizens who thought they broke the system. Here's a challenge for the comments. Name one single sovereign citizen argument that actually holds up legally. Just one. Post it below and watch what happens to your reply section. Like this video if you enjoyed the chaos and subscribe so you don't miss the next round. It gets worse.